Mark was a hard-working taxi driver who spent most of his days driving through the bustling streets of the city. Despite his long hours, he struggled to make ends meet. One chilly evening, as Mark was preparing to call it a day, he noticed a woman standing on the sidewalk, clutching her young child. Her face was streaked with tears, and her hands trembled as she waved him down. Mark stopped the taxi and rolled down the window. "Do you need a ride?" he asked gently. The woman nodded, her voice barely above a whisper as she gave him the address. It was clear she was going through something heartbreaking. As he drove, Mark couldn't help but glance at her through the rearview mirror. Her child sat quietly on her lap, and her eyes were filled with sorrow. When they reached her destination, she rummaged through her bag, but Mark stopped her. "Don't worry about the fare," he said. "It's on me." The woman stared at him, stunned. I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice breaking. Mark smiled and simply replied, "Take care of yourself and your little one." That night, as Mark lay in bed, he couldn't stop thinking about her. He wasn't in a position to give away free rides often. Every penny mattered to him. Yet, something about her pain had moved him deeply. He hoped she was safe, and that things would get better for her. Just as he was drifting off to sleep, his phone buzzed. Surprised, he reached for it. It was unusual for him to get calls late at night. "Hello," he answered hesitantly. "Is this Mark, the taxi driver?" A calm yet urgent voice asked. "Yes, this is Mark," he replied, sitting up. "I'm calling on behalf of the woman you drove home earlier," the voice continued. Mark's heart raced. "Is she okay?" "She's safe, but there's something important we need to discuss." The caller explained that the woman came from a wealthy family, but had been estranged from them for years due to a series of personal tragedies. That night, she had been at her lowest, feeling completely hopeless. Mark's small act of kindness had been a lifeline for her, and she had shared her story with her family after returning home. The man on the phone continued, "Her family wants to meet you. They were deeply moved by what you did." Mark was taken aback. He didn't understand why a simple act of kindness had garnered such attention. The caller gave him an address and asked if he could come by the next day. Curiosity got the better of him, and he agreed. The following morning, Mark found himself standing in front of a grand mansion, a house that seemed like it belonged in a movie. Nervously, he rang the doorbell. An older man in a suit greeted him warmly. "Mark, thank you for coming," he said, introducing himself as John, a close friend of the family. John led Mark into a luxurious sitting room, where the woman from the previous night was waiting. She looked calm and composed now, her sadness replaced by gratitude. "Mark," she began, her voice steady, "what you did for me last night, it meant more than you could ever know. You reminded me that kindness still exists in this world." Mark shifted uncomfortably, unused to such attention. "I just did what anyone would do," he said. John smiled. "Not everyone would have done what you did, Mark, and that's why we wanted to thank you." John went on to explain that the family owned several businesses and had a tradition of helping those who demonstrated selflessness and kindness. "Your act of compassion reminded us of the values we hold dear," he said. "We'd like to offer you a financial gift to clear your debts and give you a fresh start. But more than that, we'd like to offer you a job in one of our companies." Mark was speechless. A job? A financial gift? He had never expected anything in return for his actions. He had only wanted to help someone in need. Seeing his hesitation, the woman added, "This is our way of showing gratitude. You helped me when I needed it most, and now it's our turn to help you." Overwhelmed, Mark accepted their offer. His life changed almost overnight. The financial struggles that had weighed him down for years were gone, and he found himself in a stable job that allowed him to grow. But more than the money or the job, what stayed with Mark was the feeling that his kindness had created a ripple effect. The woman and her family stayed in touch, and they became close friends. Reflecting on everything, Mark realized that the smallest acts of kindness can have the most profound impact, not just on others, but on your own life as well. Mark's story didn't end with the opportunities he received from the family. In fact, it was just the beginning of a new chapter in his life, one that was filled with growth, self-discovery, and the power of human connection. As he stepped into his new role at the family's business, he quickly realized that he had more to offer than he had ever imagined. The position required him to manage logistics and oversee operations, a task that initially seemed daunting, considering his lack of formal education or prior experience in such a role. But Mark approached this new challenge with the same humility and determination that had carried him through his struggles as a taxi driver. Every day brought new lessons. Mark spent hours learning from his colleagues, asking questions, and absorbing everything he could about the business. It wasn't long before his natural problem-solving skills and people-oriented nature began to shine through. He discovered that his years of driving a taxi had taught him more than he realized. He had honed his ability to navigate stressful situations, communicate effectively with people from all walks of life, and adapt to unexpected challenges. These skills, coupled with his genuine kindness, quickly earned him the respect of his coworkers. As the weeks turned into months, Mark found himself thriving in his new role. He worked hard, not just to prove himself, but because he genuinely cared about the job. The family he had helped saw his potential and provided him with guidance and mentorship. They treated him like one of their own, always encouraging him to aim higher and reminding him that he was capable of achieving great things. For the first time in his life, Mark felt valued and supported. This newfound sense of belonging gave him the confidence to dream bigger than he ever had before. Outside of work, Mark's life also began to transform in unexpected ways. The financial security he now had allowed him to focus on the things that truly mattered to him. He reconnected with old friends he had lost touch with during his years of struggle and even began volunteering at a local shelter, inspired by the kindness that had changed his own life. Mark's heart remained as compassionate as ever, and he found joy in giving back to others who were going through hard times. The bond between Mark and the woman's family grew stronger over time. They invited him to family gatherings, introduced him to their friends, and treated him like a member of their inner circle. Mark, who had spent so many years feeling invisible to the world, was now surrounded by people who appreciated him for who he was. This sense of community brought him a happiness he hadn't known he was missing. One evening, as Mark sat with the family, the woman he had helped opened up to him about her past. She told him about the tragedy that had caused her to distance herself from her family and the struggles she had faced trying to rebuild her life on her own. Her voice trembled as she spoke, but there was a sense of peace in her words. She explained how his simple act of kindness had been a turning point for her, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there were still good people in the world. Mark listened intently, his heart heavy with empathy, but also filled with gratitude for the chance to make a difference in someone's life. As the years went by, Mark's life continued to flourish. He climbed the ranks within the business, earning promotions and taking on greater responsibilities. His hard work and dedication paid off, and he eventually became one of the company's most trusted managers. But despite his success, Mark never forgot where he came from. He remained humble, always treating everyone with the same kindness and respect that had defined him as a person. Mark's story began to inspire others. Word of his journey spread, and people who heard about him were moved by the way a single act of compassion had transformed his life. Mark was invited to speak at community events, where he shared his experiences and encouraged others to embrace kindness in their own lives. His words resonated deeply with those who heard them, and many were inspired to pay it forward, creating their own ripple effects of positivity. One day, Mark received a letter in the mail from a young man who had heard his story. The letter explained how the young man had been going through a difficult time and was on the verge of giving up. But after hearing about Mark's journey, he decided to hold on a little longer and look for ways to help others, even in his own struggles. The letter ended with a simple thank you, but its impact on Mark was profound. He realized that his story was no longer just about him. It was a reminder of the incredible power of kindness and the ways it could change lives. As Mark reflected on everything that had happened, he couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the way his life had unfolded. He thought back to that fateful night when he had refused payment from a woman in need. At the time, it had seemed like such a small gesture, but it had set off a chain of events that had brought him to where he was now. Mark knew that his journey hadn't been easy, but he was grateful for every twist and turn along the way. In the end, Mark's story wasn't just about the opportunities he had received or the success he had achieved. It was about the resilience of the human spirit, the importance of compassion, and the idea that even the smallest acts of kindness could have a lasting impact. Mark carried these lessons with him every day, using them to guide his actions and inspire others. His life became a testament to the fact that no matter how hard things might seem, there was always hope, and that hope often came from the most unexpected places. Mark's journey continued, and with each new chapter, he remained true to the values that had defined him from the start. He knew that life was unpredictable and that challenges would always arise, but he also knew that kindness had the power to overcome even the toughest obstacles. And so, with a grateful heart and an unwavering belief in the goodness of people, Mark embraced the future, ready to face whatever it might bring. Mark's days became a seamless blend of purpose and fulfillment, each one carrying him further along the path he never imagined he would walk. His role at the business was no longer just a job. It was a platform where he could pour his heart into something meaningful. He was now more than just a manager. He was a mentor, a leader, and someone others turned to for guidance. His colleagues often approached him not just for work-related advice but for personal matters, knowing he had a unique way of understanding and offering wisdom. Mark, with his humble beginnings and profound life experiences, had become a source of strength for those around him. The business flourished under his watch, and his contributions became impossible to overlook. He had a knack for seeing solutions where others saw problems, a quality that set him apart. Mark would often credit his taxi driving days for this ability, as he had learned then how to navigate the unexpected twists and turns of life. But those who knew him recognized it was more than that. It was his character, his empathy, and his unwavering dedication to doing right by others. Meanwhile, Mark's relationship with the family that had changed his life grew even deeper. They celebrated his victories as if they were their own, and supported him in moments of doubt. To Mark, they were more than just benefactors or employers. They were family in every sense of the word. The woman whose life he had helped save often told him how grateful she was, but Mark would always remind her that it was her kindness that had given him a chance to rewrite his story. Their bond was one built on mutual respect and an understanding of the power of compassion. Over time, Mark found himself reflecting more and more on the idea of giving back. He understood better than anyone how transformative an act of kindness could be, and he wanted to create opportunities for others to experience the same. He began to organize community initiatives through the business, focusing on helping those who, like him, had faced adversity and needed a hand to lift them up. These efforts ranged from providing job training for the unemployed to supporting local shelters and food banks. Mark poured his heart into these projects, knowing firsthand how much of a difference they could make. One of the most rewarding aspects of these initiatives was seeing the ripple effect they created. People who had once been recipients of help were now paying it forward, inspired by Mark's story and the opportunities they had been given. Mark would often watch from the sidelines, his heart swelling with pride as he saw others embrace the same values that had guided his own journey. It was a reminder that the kindness he had shown years ago was still making waves, touching lives in ways he could never have predicted. Mark's personal life also blossomed during this time. For years, he had focused so much on survival that he hadn't allowed himself to dream of anything beyond his immediate circumstances. But now, with stability and purpose in his life, he found room for love. He met someone who shared his values, someone who saw the world with the same sense of wonder and compassion that he did. Their connection was instant and profound, built on a foundation of mutual respect and admiration. Together, they created a life filled with laughter, support, and a shared commitment to making the world a better place. As the years went by, Mark became a symbol of hope and resilience in his community. People who were struggling would often seek him out, looking for advice or simply a kind word to lift their spirits. Mark never turned anyone away, no matter how busy or tired he might have been. He remembered all too well what it felt like to be invisible, to feel as though the world had given up on you. And so he made it his mission to ensure that no one who crossed his path ever felt that way. One particularly memorable moment came when Mark was approached by a young man who reminded him of his younger self. The man was down on his luck, struggling to make ends meet, and unsure of how to turn his life around. Mark listened to his story with an open heart, offering words of encouragement and practical advice. But he didn't stop there. He connected the man with resources, introduced him to people who could help, and even invited him to join one of the community programs he had started. Over time, the young man began to find his footing, and his life started to change. He often credited Mark for helping him, but Mark would always insist that the young man's success was his own doing. It was moments like these that reminded Mark why he did what he did, because everyone deserved a chance to find their place in the world, just as he had been given his. Mark's life became a testament to the idea that no act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted. He often marveled at how his journey had unfolded, from a struggling taxi driver to someone who was now in a position to help others in ways he never thought possible. He knew that his story wasn't just about him. It was about the interconnectedness of all people and the incredible things that could happen when we chose to lift each other up. In his quieter moments, Mark would sometimes sit back and reflect on the chain of events that had brought him to where he was. He thought about the night he had refused to take payment from a woman in need, about the risks he had taken and the challenges he had faced along the way. He thought about the people who had believed in him, even when he hadn't believed in himself, and the lessons he had learned through both triumph and failure. Mark understood that life was full of uncertainties, and that not every story would unfold the way his had. But he also knew that as long as there was kindness in the world, there was hope. He carried this belief with him every day, using it to fuel his work and inspire those around him. And though he could never have predicted the path his life would take, he was endlessly grateful for every twist and turn, knowing that each one had brought him closer to the person he was meant to be. Mark's journey was far from over, but he faced the future with a sense of peace and purpose. He had discovered the power of kindness, the resilience of the human spirit, and the incredible ways in which lives could be transformed when people came together to support one another. His story was a reminder that no matter how difficult life might seem, there was always a way forward, and that sometimes the smallest acts of compassion could create the biggest changes of all. Mark's life had evolved into something remarkable, a tapestry woven with threads of resilience, compassion, and unwavering determination. His every action seemed to carry the weight of his past, but rather than letting it burden him, he used it as a source of strength. Each day, as he walked into the office or worked on community projects, he was reminded of how far he had come. The gratitude he felt was immense, not only for the second chance he had been given but for the people who had been placed in his life at just the right moments. Their kindness had been the catalyst for his transformation, and he never forgot that. He poured more energy into expanding the reach of his initiatives, recognizing that while his story was unique, the struggles he had faced were not. He knew there were countless others out there who needed that same spark of hope, that one chance to prove themselves. He partnered with local organizations and even garnered the attention of regional leaders who applauded his efforts to uplift the community. The projects became larger in scale, but Mark never lost sight of the individual lives they touched. For him, success was not measured in numbers or accolades, but in the smiles of the people whose lives were changed. Mark often found himself speaking at events, sharing his story with others who were struggling or those who wanted to make a difference but didn't know how. His words resonated deeply, as they came not from a place of theory, but from lived experience. He would recount the nights spent driving aimlessly through the city, the moments of doubt when he wondered if he would ever find his way, and the transformative power of a single act of kindness. People listened intently, many moved to tears by his honesty and the rawness of his journey. Mark never embellished his story or sought to make himself a hero. He simply shared the truth, and in doing so, he inspired others to believe in the possibility of change. Through these engagements, he began to connect with others who had their own stories of overcoming adversity. They shared their struggles and triumphs, and Mark found himself learning just as much from them as they did from him. These interactions reinforced his belief in the resilience of the human spirit and the incredible things that could happen when people supported one another. He often returned from these events feeling reinvigorated, ready to dive even deeper into his work and to continue pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Meanwhile, the business continued to thrive, becoming a model of ethical practices and community engagement. Mark's leadership had set a tone of compassion and integrity that permeated every aspect of the organization. Employees felt valued and empowered, and the sense of camaraderie was palpable. It was not uncommon for team members to stay late brainstorming ways to improve their outreach efforts or to volunteer their time for the causes Mark championed. The workplace had become more than just a job for many. It was a place where they felt they could truly make a difference. Mark's personal life remained a source of joy and stability. His partner became his biggest supporter, encouraging him to take time for himself even as he dedicated so much to others. Together, they created a home that was warm and welcoming, a sanctuary where Mark could recharge and reflect. Their shared values made their bond unbreakable, and they often worked together on community projects, drawing strength from their shared purpose. Mark cherished these moments, knowing that the love and support he had found were gifts he could never take for granted. As the years went by, Mark's impact grew far beyond what he had ever imagined. He was invited to participate in larger forums, where he could share his insights on the importance of compassion and community in creating meaningful change. His story became a beacon of hope for those who felt trapped by their circumstances, a reminder that it was never too late to rewrite your narrative. People from all walks of life reached out to him, sharing how his words and actions had inspired them to take the first steps toward their own transformations. One of the most profound moments in Mark's journey came when he was approached by a group of young people who had been inspired by his story to start their own community initiative. They had come together to address issues in their neighborhood, using many of the principles Mark had shared in his talks. Their enthusiasm and determination were infectious, and Mark felt a deep sense of pride as he watched them take ownership of their vision. He offered his support, providing guidance and resources where he could, but he made sure to step back and let them lead. This was their journey, and he knew how important it was for them to find their own way. Mark's philosophy on life continued to evolve, shaped by the countless lives he touched and the lessons he learned along the way. He often reflected on the interconnectedness of all things, the way one act of kindness could set off a chain reaction that rippled far beyond what anyone could see. He marveled at the beauty of this truth, finding solace in the knowledge that even the smallest actions could have profound consequences. It was this belief that kept him going, even on days when the challenges seemed insurmountable. As he grew older, Mark began to think about his legacy. He didn't care about recognition or awards. What mattered to him was ensuring that the work he had started would continue long after he was gone. He began mentoring a new generation of leaders, sharing his knowledge, and instilling in them the values that had guided his life. He emphasized the importance of empathy, integrity, and perseverance, knowing that these qualities would serve them well no matter what challenges they faced. Mark's efforts to give back culminated in the creation of a foundation dedicated to helping those in need. The foundation's mission was simple yet profound: to provide opportunities for people to rise above their circumstances and to inspire others to do the same. Mark poured his heart and soul into this endeavor, drawing on everything he had learned over the years to build something that could stand the test of time. The foundation became a lifeline for many, offering not just financial support but also mentorship, education, and a sense of belonging. Through it all, Mark remained humble, always quick to credit others for the success of his endeavors. He knew that none of it would have been possible without the countless individuals who had supported him along the way. Their kindness had been the foundation on which he had built his life, and he was determined to honor that legacy by continuing to pay it forward. In his quieter moments, Mark often found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him to this point. He thought about the countless people whose lives had intersected with his own, each one leaving an indelible mark on his heart. He thought about the struggles and the triumphs, the moments of doubt and the flashes of clarity, and the unwavering belief that had carried him through it all. Mark's story was a testament to the power of resilience and the transformative impact of kindness. It was a reminder that no matter how dark the night might seem, there was always a glimmer of hope waiting to be discovered. And as he looked toward the future, Mark knew that his journey was far from over. There were still lives to touch, dreams to inspire, and a world to change, one act of kindness at a time.